Today we look at Meesho, an e-commerce app that is literally breaking records right now. It has grown app downloads by more than 5x in 12 months. And this massive spike in popularity has prompted Data AI to crown Meesho as the breakout shopping app of 2022. Today, the platform, which competes with the likes of Walmart-owned Flipkart, Amazon, and others, counts more than 100 million Indians who have made purchases. So my guest today is the architect of this success. He has more than 15 years of experience building and scaling high-performance product management organizations and executing complex cross-functional projects. More importantly, he's the chief product officer at Meesho, that company I just told you about, a hyper-growth company where he leads product management, product analytics, design, user research, the works. And before joining Meesho, he held positions at other retail giants, including, Amazon and Flipkart. So it's a long and impressive track record. And my guest today is Kirti Varun Avasarala. He is, as I said, Chief Product Officer at Meesho. So Kirti, first of all, let's just start there. I mentioned it, Amazon, Flipkart, even some time at McKinsey. Tell me a little bit about the talent or learning that you bring with you to make Meesho what it is, what Data AI has said, the breakout success of 2022.
Firstly, thanks, Peggy, for the kind introduction, and I think it's great to be having this conversation. Talking about learnings, I think the last 15 years have been quite an interesting ride for me across different stints in different kinds of companies. If I talk more specifically, I think the McKinsey stint obviously helped a lot in strategic thinking, impactful communication, because you end up dealing with lots of clients on their most important strategic issues. After that, I think the stints at Amazon and Flipkart, I think, were very, very formative in who I am today. Both of them, I think, helped me understand retail, the e-commerce space in India, and also more broadly about product management, product leadership. I think they've been immensely sort of valuable in shaping the kind of role that I'm playing here at Meesho. Even at Meesho, I think the last 2.5 odd years actually have helped me figure out how to be a very senior leader in a high growth company, right? How do you hire and build great talent? How do you set a product vision? How do you create the right product culture within the company? Also, if I reflect back at an overall level on my career till now, I think the thing that probably I've sort of realized a lot in terms of learning and which I've sort of brought to the table here is just the fact that if you are in a senior leadership role, I think the most important thing is to be a very versatile and multifunctional leader. I think you need to have a very holistic view towards different aspects of business, and you need to bring some of that holistic thinking towards decision making, right? Which I do feel is like a superpower, right? Which differentiates the best leaders from others. And my attempt has been to figure out how to develop this, and I'm still obviously learning and trying.
And all of those learnings, it's when you apply them that has the most impact. That's the most important. Now, last time I checked in, full disclosure, I was writing about you at Forbes, and you had just racked up more than 5 million orders in one day. One sales event in June, that was the record. What's new at Meesho since?
Yeah, I think last 2 odd years have been actually a great growth journey for us. I think we've hit many milestones like the ones that you mentioned along the way. In terms of what's new, I think the fact that we've grown so much and we're also in a very strong position as a company, it has also given us a lot of freedom to try out new businesses, new product lines, which is what I think we've been doing over the last 3 to 6 months. And in terms of what's new, I think those are the new things that are going on. So to give you a sense, I think one of the things that I'm most excited about, which we've just launched recently, is live streaming commerce, which is a very unique thing in the Indian e-commerce context, where basically we are redefining the core shopping experience of an e-commerce app. So we now have sellers, influencers who are creating live videos to demo their products, and consumers can directly watch the video and buy during the video itself, right? So it's a very, very unique proposition, and we're in the process of scaling that up. So that's, I think, something very new. The other new big bet we have, which we've been sort of working on over the last 6 months or so, is what we call Superstore. So this is our grocery e-commerce business. And as I think many of you will understand, grocery is like the holy grail of e-commerce, right? The category within e-commerce, which I think even the biggest players in the world have struggled to disrupt using technology. So we are adopting a very different model. This is a community group buying model for grocery. And in India, especially with the kind of income segments we have, grocery tends to be the largest retail consumption category. So if you want to be a very big e-commerce player, you need to disrupt grocery. And that's the attempt we're making. So that's another new big bet that I'm super excited about.
When I think about it, I won't put you there, Kirti, but group buying for grocery, that does sound very disruptive. That also sounds very exciting because a lot of what you're doing at Meesho and a lot of the reason why I have you here today is because these are lessons that every marketer on the planet can benefit from. No matter where you are, you're wondering, how do I compete with the giants and win? The Amazon, the Flipkart, etc. And this is what you've done, maybe because you had a little bit of time there as well, but share some of the approaches that have helped you literally punch above your weight.
I think the most important aspect that Meesho as a company has got right, which has helped us to become what we are today, I think is our understanding of the e-commerce market in India itself. Like if you look at India, there are about 700 million people who use smartphone internet, but only about 100 million people till a couple of years back used to shop on e-commerce platforms like Amazon, Flipkart. And these 100 million were the urban, affluent consumers of India. So what I think we at Meesho figured out is there's a huge white space of the remaining 600 million people who have access to smartphone internet but are not sort of using e-commerce, right? Our understanding of these people was I think critical in us disrupting the market. And one of the most unique insights about this large user base is many of them are in the tier 2 and beyond geographies of the country, so semi-urban, rural people. Many of them, or almost all of them, are low to mid income in terms of their household wealth. And for all of these people, pricing matters a lot, which means they're very value conscious. Traditionally, the e-commerce value proposition for the affluent people has always been around convenience. Like we'll ship items to you very fast, you can order very easily, and so on. Whereas for this consumer segment, that convenience didn't matter as much. What mattered more was the low price and sort of the value conscious nature. So what we sort of figured out is that our strategy needs to be very opposite to what I think the other players had done. So that's why in simple terms, we call our strategy price over convenience, which is how can you build a platform that offers a large selection of unbranded, low priced items to these consumers, even at the expense of convenience, which means that a lot of these consumers will buy something if it's $20 cheaper, even though it may ship 2 days later to them, right? So our understanding of this consumer segment and having clarity on this is how the strategy should be, I think has been sort of the biggest reason why I think we've been able to disrupt this market, even though we had established players already operating when we entered the market.
How did you come to understand your audience so well? Was it just very, very smart segmentation or also some survey in there to figure out how do you know that it matters most to your audience to have price over convenience, for example?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think one of the reasons why we've been able to do this well is also baked into how the company itself operates and the culture we have. So one of the rituals within the company is actually called listen or die. I know it sounds extreme. So
That's
the
extreme,
idea
yeah.
here is the idea here is how can you have a very direct connect with the consumers you're serving, right? Instead of using methods like surveys, etc., which we do deploy when needed. But a lot of our consumer insights are by actually talking to consumers, right? So right from the senior most people in the company to people who are at junior levels and who've just joined the company, almost everybody follows this ritual. And in this ritual, what we do is every few months, we pick a set of consumers and actually talk to them, right? And try to understand their preferences, try to understand if they're already using Meesho, we try to understand why they're using it, what are their pain points, what will it take for us to improve their experience. We also talk to consumers who don't shop on Meesho and try to understand why have they not explored yet, right? So through a series of these very deep conversations, I think we've figured out almost all of the insights that have helped build Meesho, right? And this is a very counterintuitive approach to consumer insights compared to what I think many other companies would do, which is sort of floating surveys, commissioning market research projects, and so on. So we do some of those when needed, but a lot of our insights come from just talking to consumers. And also, what we've realized is when you talk to consumers enough frequently and you cover the length and breadth of the country, you have different pockets in India. When you do that consistently, I think you get enough insights which are very deep, which can actually help you build a very disruptive proposition, right? So that's actually been one of our secret sauces, which has helped us understand this segment.
I love that it's so simple, but yet so profound. It's listening, which is what we talk about all the time. Know your audience, listen to your audience. It's exciting to see how you put these insights into practice. One is, of course, your value proposition, but another is how you're using different tactics that work in different app verticals. And we were talking in prep about how you're making e-commerce more engaging and what you're using to make that, well, make retail, the whole entire retail journey, sticky. Give me an example of what you're learning from other verticals and how you're applying that.
Yeah, one of the insights we've had actually from some of those listen or die conversations is that a lot of the consumers who use Meesho actually have a lot of time on their hand. And these are not like millennials or people working in hectic jobs, right? So they're people in semi-urban, rural parts of the country. And for them, shopping in some ways also is like entertainment. And once we figured this insight out, what we did is we started making the app more engaging and fun, in addition to just enabling people to shop, right? And that led us to many different social features on the app, which are quite unique, which you wouldn't find on a regular e-commerce app. For example, one of the things that we launched about a year and a half back is what we call journeys, right? So this is actually a milestone-based rewards program for consumers as a cross different shopping milestone. So if you're a consumer, we call you a beginner. Then you make some purchases, then you accumulate some points, then we call you a learner, and then so on. You accumulate more points, you become a legend at the end, right? And as you cross these stages, you not just get rewards which you can redeem as discounts, but you also get badges, etc., which increase your sort of social recognition as well, because other consumers also can see that. So I think we invested in this, which I think has been very, very impactful. We also have something called community on our app, which is actually a social feed, which means that if you as a consumer have bought something, you can actually share the picture of that item, and other consumers can see that and they can respond to it. They can get inspired by it and buy that same item. So that is basically like a social feed within an e-commerce app, right? So we've sort of done that over the last few years. Even the live streaming commerce point I mentioned earlier is also blending content and commerce together, right? So again, it's a very engaging way of shopping on the app, right? Which we are going to scale up now. So our attempt has been to make shopping more fun and engaging as opposed to a very transactional, sort of boring activity, right? Which is you have something in mind, you just want to buy and get out. What we've realized, a lot of consumers want to spend time on Meesho almost as if it was an Instagram or a Facebook, right? So that insight actually helped us build all of these things, and we see very high engagement on Meesho. One of the metrics that all consumer internet apps look at is the DAU by MAU ratio, right? So that indicates the depth of engagement. So daily active users by monthly active users. So in e-commerce apps, Meesho has the highest DAU by MAU of any other app. And that again is a reflection of the fact that the time that people spend here is much, much higher than on any other shopping app, right? So a lot of these different things have also helped us build this approach.
Technology always has to stay invisible, but it is decisive. Tell us about the customer experience and how you achieve this.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, and often tech companies need to understand that technology, while it's such a big enabler, it needs to be invisible, right? The consumer experience has to be very seamless. At Meesho, again, we've sort of leveraged technology very deeply, and I think we've done it across a few different areas, which actually add a lot of value to our core consumer experience. So I'll talk about maybe a few things which probably differentiate us a lot. The first one is actually the size of the Meesho app, right? So it's actually 14 MB, And this actually is the lowest sized consumer internet app in India and probably also in many countries across the world. And if you look at other e-commerce apps or other consumer internet apps, they would be 40 MB or higher, right, in terms of the size. And the reason why we made it a very lightweight app is also coming again from that listen or die insight of our consumers. So many of our consumers are in the low to mid income segment. They use very low end smartphones which have very little storage space. So often what happens is if you have apps which require higher storage space, a lot of these consumers will use the apps a few times and then uninstall them and use another app, right? Because of the size constraints they have on their phones. So that's one of the reasons why we optimize the technology behind our app so much that we've sort of become a very, very lightweight app. And we see our consumers never uninstalling our app for the most part, right? The other thing which is very unique about the Meesho app is also the simplicity in our UX design. Again, a lot of these consumers that we serve, many of them are new to e-commerce itself. So people who've been just shopping offline before and now are buying online. So they are relatively less tech savvy. So their ability to sort of understand a shopping journey, which is very complex, is low. So when you go through the Meesho app shopping journey, it's much simpler, less cluttered, a lot of visual iconography and visual communication, visual cues, which help people shop as opposed to writing a lot of text, which they have to read. Right. So that makes the UX design very simple. Another very unique insight that we found in our UX design is a lot of the consumers who start buying with us are people who have got introduced to technology through apps like WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram. And in all of these apps, one unique thing that you will notice is most of them have only vertical scrolling, right? So you keep on scrolling vertically on feeds. There is very little horizontal scroll. Whereas if you look at regular e-commerce apps, most of them have a lot of horizontal scroll, right? Whereas if you see Meesho, almost all of the scrolling that we have is vertical, right? So this again was a very conscious UX design choice because we know that a lot of these consumers have been sort of brought up on these social apps and now they're migrating to e-commerce and we need to make the UX easy for them. So a lot of these elements also make the app very simple to use, and often a lot of consumers tell us when we talk to them that when we ask them, why do you buy on Meesho apart from low pricing, etc., this is one of the reasons they quote most, right?
That is such an important point. A lot of marketers, again, everywhere on the planet, it's about keeping it simple. It's about making it an enjoyable experience. And something as simple as just understanding that it has to be a vertical scroll or that there have to be simple calls to action, and what a difference that has made in your app. I think that that's just a point. You're being a little humble about what you've made, actually, Kirti, because that is, it's lightweight, easy to use. Those are probably two very, very important points.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those have really helped us penetrate the market and get people who had a lot of barriers in shopping online to actually come to Meesho and shop. I think the other aspect I would also highlight, which I think is quite different about Meesho, is our overall communications strategy, right, of how we engage consumers. So while all the channels that are typically available, we leverage them just like any other e-commerce app would. But the area where we have invested a lot is in the push notifications and the core communication infrastructure behind it. So we do have in-house infrastructure. We use tools like CleverTap as well, which power a lot of our communications. But one of the unique things that we've done is to also figure out how to personalize that communication. And the reality is the overall market that we're serving of these 600 million people I was talking about, there are many, many micro segments in that, right? India is anyway a very heterogeneous country. The demand patterns vary a lot. So that's what led us to sort of a lot of data science related efforts in personalizing push notifications and overall communications. That also actually has helped us engage and retain these consumers in a very significant way.
Share some of those learnings because it would be very interesting. You've obviously worked on segmentation. Listening to customers has also allowed you to put, if you will, overlay that with a rich layer of not just implicit, but sort of explicit personalization. They know what they want and you're listening to them. What have you learned, for example, around how to give different customer segments the messages they will accept and appreciate?
Yeah, I think this has been a big learning journey for us over the last few years. As we analyzed more and more data on how our push notifications are being received by consumers, I think what we realized is that different kinds of content in push notifications appeals to different consumers differently. So the relevance changes a lot. So which you look at through metrics like click-through rates and so on. So it varies a lot. So the same message, if you send to a bunch of different consumers, their click-through rates are very different. And the reason why that is the case is because their category affinity is different, their gender is different, even the time of the day when you send that notification, different people are doing different things at that point in time. So their mind space towards the notification is very different. So I think the entire content piece, I think making it relevant was one thing that we realized we have to solve. I think the second thing, which also was quite interesting, is the volume of notifications. How many notifications do you send? And there, I think there is a sort of spectrum. On the one end, there are consumers who like more notifications, and these typically tend to be women consumers who are housewives, etc., who have time on their hand, who like actually looking at fashion items, and for them, more notifications is better. But on the other extreme, you also have consumers for whom, if you cross a certain threshold of notifications, of number of notifications, they actually uninstall the app, right? So for us, it was about figuring out that sweet spot of the right volume so that you can maximize relevance and click through rates, but at the same time minimize installs, which meant we had to figure out who the consumer is and then send the right type of notification and also the right volume. So that actually has been a very complex data science led personalization exercise.
Just curious, is there a range that you can say, sort of like on average, if you go over, I don't know, 7 in a certain period, it's a no go?
Yeah, the actual range also, by the way, depends a lot on the kind of consumer internet app you are. So just to give you an example of a different sector, like if you're in social networking, right? So there the threshold is much higher. So there you can send 20, 25, 30 notifications a day and still probably it's okay. Now, when it comes to e-commerce, there I think the range is much smaller, right? But having said that, different consumers are at different ends of the range. For example, roughly a good benchmark to think about is something like six notifications a day to something like a 15, 16 a day, right? So that sort of tends to be the range.
Another thing you're figuring out is something that all marketers are talking about, maybe even now more than before, the hook. You know, you have to make certain your app is habit forming. What is the hook? How do you get people to come in and stay there? You know, Reforge talks about it all the time, but what's really surprising is you have come up with a formula for understanding when retention kicks in, which is very exciting. So I just want you to unpack that for us and tell us how you make your app habit forming.
In the last few years, I think it's become sort of the holy grail that marketers are chasing, which is this habit formation point. I think we've also understood the concept and then try to figure out how we apply in our context. And again, what we realized after a lot of experimentation, which our growth team has done, is around saying that okay, if we acquire a new consumer, uh, first is we need to make them understand what online shopping is in the first place, right? Which is to get them to place a first one or two orders. But then after that, there's a journey towards what we call habit formation point, which is basically the point after which the retention of that consumer becomes stable, after which you can be confident that this person has built a habit. And then if your experience is good enough, then they won't churn out, right? So how do you analytically figure out what that habit formation point is? And that's where I think we sort of ran multiple experiments with different consumer segments over a fairly long period of time, and then came to the conclusion, at least on the Meesho app, if there are consumers who do, I think, about 4 orders in the first 4 months, that is what we have seen leads to stable retention. So therefore, that sort of is the habit formation point. So 4 orders in 4 months. So our goal then was to figure out every new consumer we acquire, how do we get them across this hump of 4 orders in the first 4 months? And that led us to then fine tune multiple things, right? First is the onboarding user experience. So when you come in, how can we assist you digitally to place your first order? How can we show you the right kind of merchandise which will appeal to you, right? Based on which part of the country you're in, what we know about your demographics and so on. Then we've also spent sort of a lot of effort in figuring out how do we optimize your early experience till that habit formation point? How can we curate the experience for you? How do we ensure that you don't face any negative experience? Sometimes also ensuring that we give you some incentives to cross that hump as well, right? So all of these different initiatives uh, help us get to that habit formation point, which then leads to stable retention. And the basic starting point for all of this was for us to first figure out what that habit formation point is, because if you don't know that, then you wouldn't know how long to put all of these initiatives on, and how much to invest behind it. And as a marketer, you also want ROI on the money that you're spending, right?
If you find out that it's 4 purchases in 4 months, then you make, as you said yourself, make everything work so that you are leading customers to that optimal outcome. So really, it's something that all of the marketers who are listening in, all of our audience listening in, can think about and apply and make work for them.
Absolutely, they can. And one more thing that we figured out about this habit formation point is it's not static in time, which means that this also keeps changing. And a lot of it also changes based on the market context, your competition, your own value proposition evolving. So it's obviously an exercise that you do to discover it, but at the same time it can change. So one of the attempts we're also making is, how do we revisit this every 6 months, every 9 months, to see if that truly is still the habit formation point, or has that shifted forward or backward, right? So it's also something not very static in time. So that's something that we've also figured out now, and we're trying to constantly refine it as well as we grow in scale. We now have more than 130 million active users, right? So as we grow in scale more and more and more, obviously every new user that we acquire, it becomes much harder to retain them, right? Because just the scale is so larger. So obviously some of these habit formation points may shift. So just being able to look at the data and constantly calibrate this, I think, is also very important.
So you're looking at the data all the time, and that gives you insights. I want to delve into some of those insights, some of your opinions, informed opinion, edgy opinion, by throwing a concept out there. And I want to hear the first thing that you answer back, or what comes to mind when I say it. So I'm going to kick off with thinking about where you left us off, thinking about growth. What is the thing you think of when I say the marketer's most important growth engine?
I think for me, it's product-led growth, right? I think the way the consumer internet sector has evolved, uh, product-led initiatives are playing a much, much larger role in every aspect of growth, beyond just the performance marketing and branding, which almost every company does. Now it's about the kind of things we discussed, right? Figuring out the habit formation point, figuring out the right core product onboarding experience, sort of nailing all of that. I think that's what, to me, is the growth engine for every marketer, if you want to get to scale.
So you personalize your experiences. You also match them to your segmentation. Everything is about the customer. What's the biggest myth about personalization?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think one of the things I've observed, at least in a lot of consumer internet companies, is the perception that personalization is a one-time thing that you do and it's done and dusted, right? Even there, if you look at any feed of items on an e-commerce app or a news feed in a social networking app, there you apply personalization, but your personalization models, the data science models, also need to evolve with time, because consumer preferences change, your competition changes. So and you get more data about consumers, right? So even your personalization models need to evolve, and you need to revisit them again every 6 months or so, and refine them, as opposed to assuming that, hey, I have personalized this feed, so it's done, let me go to another project, right? So this has actually been a learning from what we've done at Meesho, where initially we had that mindset, and then we realized that as we personalized it again, we got incrementally much, much more impact, right? So to me, I think that's one big myth, which definitely, I think, has been busted based on our own experience.
You're taking commerce to the masses, which is another goal, which is another focus, which is also something difficult to do. How do you do it?
Taking commerce to the masses, I think at least the biggest myth that has prevailed is, if you are an e-commerce company and you're serving sort of the upper tier of the market, then the only thing that you need to do is do a lot of marketing to the masses and give them discounts, and all of them will start shopping on your app, right? So that myth has been busted, and Meesho is actually the example. classic example of that. So I think what is really needed is for you to rethink the entire business model and core product experience for this segment, right? As opposed to trying to replicate what you did for a different segment and hoping that it works.
And finally, short answer only, your golden rule of retention. What is it?
The golden rule of retention, which at least I've figured out, is to think of businesses in flywheel terms as opposed to linear systems, right? And just to maybe explain this quickly, flywheels are basically systems where there are feedback loops. So if you basically optimize for one metric, then that gives you some feedback, and then that helps improve the system overall. So in e-commerce, for example, if you get pricing, selection, convenience right for consumers, it automatically creates more supply. And more supply coming in creates more consumer demand, and so on. So it's a flywheel. So a big lever of retention is to ensure that your consumer side, your supply side, both are working in tandem, and you optimize both of them together versus thinking of them in isolation. So this actually has been the biggest sort of realization we've had, and I think this is actually the golden rule of retention.
And you shared it with us. That's excellent. You know, people are listening and saying, yes, I have gotten a lot of value out of this show. I know I have, and I really do appreciate everything that you've shared today, Kirti. If people want to continue a conversation, maybe you'll be writing that blog about that habit formation point. How can they stay in touch with you?
Sure, and I think we'll figure out about the blog as well. But you can people can reach me I'm there on LinkedIn. They can sort of search me up there. I'm also on Twitter as well. Again, easy to search me up there. So those are the two channels I use the most. And people can sort of email me, kirti@meesho.com, if that's something that they want to do as well.
Perfect. Lots of ways to connect with you. And I encourage everyone to do that, because I have to say that I do a lot of interviews, Kirti, but yours was in many ways outstanding because of your approach to what you do. It is so well thought through. A very valuable interview indeed. Thank you again.
Thanks a lot, Peggy, and it was great having this conversation.
And this has been The Big Leap. For our audience, we also publish this video as a podcast, which is easy for you to consume on the go, on the train, on the plane, wherever you may be. And if you're listening to the audio version, you can also see the video. Just search for The Big Leap on YouTube. This show is all about shining a light on amazing marketers who took the big leap to achieve growth through retention. So if you have a story to tell, hook up with me on LinkedIn, and we may get you set up with a show of your own. Until then, this is Peggy Anne Salz for CleverTap and The Big Leap.